He didn't say a word, not that night, not the next morning, just drank his coffee, grabbed his tool bag, and left before sunrise. The same quiet exit I'd watched for 18 years. That's how Dale was, steady, predictable, maddeningly calm. But that night, when I joked about him getting hit by a bus, something in his eyes didn't blink, didn't twitch, just flatlined, like a pilot shutting down the engine mid-flight. I thought it was harmless, just a laugh. Everyone laughed. Even Savannah nudged me and said, "You're wicked." But after the dishes were done and the wine bottles were empty, I looked around and noticed he'd cleared the table alone, wiped the counters, folded the dish towel, and vanished upstairs. Didn't kiss my cheek, didn't say goodnight. Just that heavy silence walking up hardwood stairs. The next morning, the smell of diesel lingered longer than usual. His boots were gone from the back mudroom. I didn't think much of it until I saw the envelope. It was thick, heavy, like it held more than just words. Inside, pink slipped to the truck, the deed to the house, account numbers, passwords, even the folder with our will, signed and notarized, all in one place. He left me everything, no note, no tantrum, just a full clinical extraction. If you're still listening and any of this feels uncomfortably familiar, hit like and subscribe. Most people just listen in silence, but that one click tells the team these stories matter. At first, I thought it was a test, some kind of petty move to make me squirm, so I waited. An hour, a day, a weekend, called his phone, straight to voicemail, checked the bank, access denied, went into the app and stared at the balance, 0. But not from theft, it was split, neatly, almost politely, like someone balancing a final checkbook before disappearing. I stood in our kitchen staring at that damn blank counter, the same one I joked would hold a kitchen island, and all I could think was, how the hell did he do it so quietly? Savannah came over with wine. I tried to play it casual. He's having a little midlife moment, probably camping or something. She nodded, but her usual giggle was gone. She drank one glass and left early. That's when I noticed something was off, not just with Dale, but with everyone. My brother canceled Sunday dinner. Mom's tone shifted, soft, almost nervous, when she asked if I'd spoken to him lately. Even my boss, who never gave a damn about my personal life, asked, "Everything okay at home?" And I said yes, of course, because I didn't know what else to say. Because I hadn't yet admitted that I'd lost a man without even hearing the door shut behind him. The worst part wasn't the silence, it was how much it sounded like his final answer. I lay awake at night replaying everything, the eye rolls, the thankless routines, the parties where I talked over him like he was furniture. I used to think his quiet was weakness, that he'd never leave because quiet men stay. I was wrong, because quiet men don't shout when they're done, they just vanish in plain sight. I kept waking up expecting to hear the shower. That low, predictable thud of his boots on the hardwood, the kettle clicking off, the garage door rolling open, but all I heard was the wind against the siding and the soft whine of the refrigerator, like the house itself was confused. His side of the bed was cold. I reached over, half asleep, expecting warmth, expecting breath. But the sheets were tight, tucked, undisturbed. There was no coffee smell, no clink of the spoon against the travel mug. I walked downstairs barefoot and paused in the kitchen doorway. The keys were on the table. So was the folder. I stood there for a full minute before touching it, like maybe if I didn't move, none of this was real. But it was. The pink slip to the F-150, the title to the house, our will, the insurance papers, bank credentials printed and circled in black ink. His signature scrawled with that same calm pressure he used when signing birthday cards. It wasn't a message. It was a log-off. The first thing I did was call his cell. Straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. I called again, then again. I tried his work line. No answer. I texted, "Are you okay?" Then, "This isn't funny." Then just, "Where are you?" Dots never came. I didn't want to panic. Not yet. But the dread curled tight in my stomach as I opened the banking app. The login still worked, but the joint accounts didn't exist anymore. They weren't drained, just closed, balanced to the cent. I checked the Roth IRA, mine, left untouched, the mortgage paid off. I sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs and stared at the plain wooden surface of the table like it had betrayed me. He gave me everything, every single thing, except him. I didn't cry, not then, not even after I checked the garage and saw the F-150 gone. His tools were missing. The big red Craftsman box that hadn't moved in 15 years vanished. His boots, his coat, his dad's old army tag that used to hang on the hook by the door, gone. But the hook was still there, empty, like a question. I called Savannah. No answer. I called my mom. She picked up on the second ring, but the tone in her voice was different. Careful, like she already knew. I asked, "Have you heard from Dale?" She hesitated just a beat too long. "No, honey. What's going on?" That hesitation ripped a hole in my chest I couldn't patch. I told her he left, just like that. No fight, no warning, no yelling, just left. And her first words weren't, "Are you okay?" or "What happened?" She said, "Oh," and it hit me. This wasn't news to her, maybe not directly, but the writing had been on the wall long before I ever looked up to read it. I wandered upstairs again. The bed looked too wide. The closet door hung half open like a wound. He'd taken so little it looked staged, but I knew him. Dale didn't do drama. He didn't pack boxes or leave notes on mirrors. If he was done, he was done. By noon, I'd made 6 calls and 3 emails. No replies. It felt like trying to yell through cement. At 4:13 a.m., while I was pacing the living room in his old flannel shirt, it hit me. He probably set that damn envelope down at this exact hour the night before, like it meant something, like he wanted the clock itself to remember when he chose to leave. And now, every morning at 4:13, I wake up in a house he gave me without asking for a dime and realize how loud a goodbye can be when it's whispered by a man who finally ran out of reasons to stay. I told people he cracked, that something snapped. I painted it soft at first. Burnout, stress, maybe something with his blood pressure, or one of those midlife man things people make documentaries about. He left his toothbrush, I'd say with a half smile, like it was just a phase. He'll come back when he cools off. But even I didn't believe it. Still, I played my part. Posted a photo from last summer at the lake. Captioned it, "Missed this guy," with a red heart that didn't feel like mine. Waited for likes, for sympathy. I got some, but not what I expected. The comments were polite, neutral, the messages dry. Most didn't even ask where he was. And then silence. Savannah stopped answering my texts. No warning, no explanation, just gone. The same Savannah who used to leave her wine glass in our sink without rinsing, who used to laugh too loud at my husband's expense. The same one who once joked, "If Dale ever goes missing, I'm checking the crawl space." I tried calling her twice, straight to voicemail. My brother canceled Sunday dinner, said work was hectic, then didn't reschedule. My own mother changed the subject every time I brought Dale up. She started ending calls with, "Well, take care of yourself," like she was preparing for something. I thought the world would be outraged for me. Instead, it looked relieved. The worst part came the next Thursday at 10:47 a.m. inside a stuffy little office with a ficus that had seen better days. I was meeting with Carl, our financial advisor. He was the kind of man who wore the same 2 ties on rotation and smelled faintly of printer ink. He slid a document across the table. "These are the account statements. He's withdrawn nothing from the shared accounts. The mortgage is paid off. The Roth IRA is fully transferred to you. He left his portion of the savings untouched, completely relinquished his claim." I blinked. "He what?" Carl folded his hands. "Melissa, he left you everything, even the Roth IRA. He just didn't want it." It landed like a slap, not from anger, but apathy, that cold kind of indifference that says you're not even worth the fight. I walked out of that office with a leather folder full of financial power and not an ounce of control. It didn't feel generous. It felt surgical, like being handed a gift box with the engine of your marriage inside, gutted, drained, labeled, "Yours now." At home, I stood in the foyer and realized how quiet the house had gotten. Not peaceful, empty, the kind of quiet that makes faucets drip louder, the kind where every floorboard creak feels like someone walking away from you all over again. I used to mock Dale's silence. Now I was drowning in it. The bed still held his shape. I'd try to roll into the space he left, but it always pushed me back, like the mattress had taken sides. I tried to shift the narrative, told the women in my yoga group that Dale had ghosted me, that it was cruel, irresponsible, traumatic. They nodded, but too quickly. One of them said, "You know, Dale always seemed like the kind of guy who'd bottle things up until he snapped. I mean, no offense." I laughed too loud. None taken, but offense was all I had left. That and questions I didn't dare say aloud. Not yet. Because what if he didn't snap? What if he just finally saw me clearly and decided this silence was safer than another day of being laughed at in his own home? That's when I realized the nightmare wasn't that he left. It was that nobody blamed him. It started as a rumor, the kind that slides into your day sideways and refuses to leave. Savannah's yoga friend, some woman with bleached hair and a loud voice who once borrowed my mat and never returned it, messaged me out of nowhere. "Hey, weird question," she wrote, "but didn't your husband used to work HVAC?" I stared at the screen longer than I should have, finally typed, "Yes, why?" She replied almost immediately. "I swear I saw him last weekend, Indiana, little bar off Route 52. He was laughing, like really laughing. Sitting with a woman in a denim jacket and biker boots, looked different, happier." My chest tightened. Indiana wasn't far, too close to be coincidence. I asked for details. Name of the bar, time, anything. She sent a shrug emoji and said, "Could have been someone who looked like him." But it was enough. I didn't sleep that night. I paced the house, barefoot, every shadow looking like movement. By morning, the idea had rooted itself so deep I couldn't breathe around it. Him laughing, with someone else, not hunched over a sink or silent at a dinner table, but open, warm, alive. I did what I'd never imagined I'd do. I hired a private investigator. His name was Ross. Former cop, soft voice, charged by the hour. I handed him Dale's old photo, one from before everything went stiff between us. Ross studied it and nodded. "We'll find him," he said, like that was a promise instead of a transaction. 2 weeks later, he called me back. "Nothing," he said. "No digital trail, no credit cards, no phone activity tied to that name, or any alias we could reasonably connect. It's like he stepped sideways out of his life." I gripped the phone harder. "That's not possible." Ross paused. "It's uncommon, but not impossible. Some people plan their exits very carefully." Carefully. That word followed me for days. Then the messages started. The first one came through Instagram, a verified account, blue check mark, profile photo of a microphone and sound waves. "Hi, Melissa," it read. "I'm a producer with a regional podcast. We're researching the HVAC blackout in Marion County last winter, and we're hoping to speak with you. Are you Dale's ex-wife?" My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed back, "No." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then the reply came. "Interesting. He called you his final lesson." I dropped my phone like it burned. I stared at it on the floor for a full minute before picking it back up. Reread the message. Again and again. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Final lesson. What did that even mean? I searched Marion County blackout. Dozens of articles popped up. Factories offline. Emergency repairs, a subcontractor credited anonymously for restoring systems overnight using unconventional diagnostics. No names, just praise, and one quote buried deep in a local piece. The technician declined recognition, saying some things work better when they're quiet. That night, I locked every door, then checked them twice. I pulled the curtains tight, even though no one was outside. I started noticing things I'd never paid attention to before. The hum of the HVAC kicking on, the click of the thermostat, the way the house sighed when the heat settled. It sounded like him. Another message came in, this time from an email address with no name attached, just a subject line, clarification. The body was one sentence. You were never the ending, just the reason. I deleted it immediately, then checked the trash folder, then my sent mail. I stood in the hallway afterward, shaking, trying to convince myself this was all coincidence, that I was spiraling, that grief makes you imagine patterns where there are none. But I started checking the windows before bed, every night. I'd stand there in the dark, peering out at the quiet street, half expecting to see his truck, or his silhouette, or Nothing at all, which somehow felt worse, because the scariest thought wasn't that Dale was watching me. It was that he wasn't, that he'd moved so far beyond me I'd become nothing more than a reference point in someone else's story. I didn't know it then, but while I was unraveling in that house he gave me, he was rebuilding himself somewhere I'd never find him. I learned the name by accident. It was a trade article Savannah's old coworker reposted, not tagged to me, not meant for me, just one of those algorithm scraps that float by when you scroll too late at night. The headline didn't mention Dale. It mentioned a man named Jack Nolan, grainy photo, work boots, rolled sleeves, standing in front of a shop with peeling paint and a sign that read Nolan Mechanical and Systems, Lafayette, EN, Lafayette. The same state, the same direction. My stomach dropped before my mind could catch up. I clicked. The article wasn't flashy. That's what made it worse. It talked about a small operation outside the city, a guy who fixed compressors no one else wanted to touch. Ancient boilers in schools that had been limping along since the 70s. He'd taken over an abandoned shop, rewired it himself, worked alone for months. No partners, no backstory. Just a quote near the end. I like things that work quietly. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. Jack Nolan, not Dale, not my husband. I started digging, not obsessively at first, just enough to reassure myself it was coincidence, but it never was. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. Jack Nolan didn't exist before 8 years ago. No social media, no college, no hometown. He appeared like a receipt timestamp, precise and deliberate. I found an interview in a regional supply newsletter. It mentioned he taught himself software after hours. Basic scripts at first, the article said. Automating diagnostic routines so techs could stop guessing and start fixing. He'd sold the first one to a distributor, then another, then a full suite that integrated with legacy HVAC systems most companies had written off. I remember Dale at our kitchen table years ago, sketching airflow diagrams on scrap paper while I scrolled my phone. I remembered rolling my eyes and saying, "It's just heating and cooling, not NASA." I closed my laptop and pressed my palms to my eyes. By year 5, Jack Nolan Systems was licensing software across 3 states. Quiet contracts, no press releases, payments routed through a shell company with a name so bland it disappeared into spreadsheets. By year 8, he bought out a supplier, the same one Dale used to complain about, overcharging him on parts. I used to tell him to stop whining. That's just how business works. Apparently, he listened. I tried to tell myself it didn't matter, that success didn't mean happiness, that reinvention was just another kind of running, but the photos said otherwise. He stood differently now. Straighter, less weight on his shoulders. His eyes weren't tired anymore. And the worst part? He never once mentioned me. Not as a wife, not as an obstacle, not as motivation. His story didn't need me. I wasn't the villain or the muse. I wasn't even a footnote. I started to realize something that scared me more than the whispers, more than the emails, more than the silence. He didn't disappear to punish me. He disappeared because he finally saw a life where I wasn't necessary, and that's when it hit me. While I was busy rewriting the past to survive it, he was writing a future so clean I couldn't find my fingerprints anywhere on it, not even in the margins. I was on my lunch break behind the counter at Home Goods, half eating a wilted salad and scrolling my phone when I knocked over a pile of display catalogs. They spilled everywhere. Floor, counter, under the little seasonal end cap with ceramic pumpkins. I bent down to gather them and froze. It was the cover. Black and silver lettering, simple layout. Blue collar tech. How one repairman disrupted an industry. The man on the cover had a beard, trimmed, a little rugged, not overdone. He wore dark denim and a worn brown jacket with soft creases from real use, not some stylized Instagram shoot. His boots were scuffed, but not dirty. His posture was different too, upright, squared, alert, and the eyes, they hit me like a punch. Clear, focused, not just rested, unbothered. Jack Nolan. My hands shook as I flipped to the article. His story was laid out in clean, matter-of-fact paragraphs, a quiet shop outside Lafayette, years spent fixing what others wouldn't, long nights teaching himself code, building tools not to impress investors, but to make working men's lives easier. It read like a parable, no fluff, no embellishment, just a man who did what he said he'd do and never needed applause for it, but not one line, not one, mentioned a wife, not a divorce, not a lesson, not even a shadow of the life he used to have. I wasn't just erased, I'd never existed. I read it again, cover to cover, then again. My manager walked by at one point and said something, but it came through muffled, like I was underwater. I just nodded. I couldn't even register her face. The photos were worse than the words. One showed him in the middle of a demo, wiring open, tools midair, explaining something to a group of guys in work shirts. They looked at him like he mattered, like his presence filled the room. I remembered when he used to mumble his way through explanations at our dinner table, and I'd wave him off with a smirk. Use small words, I'd joke, already halfway done with my wine. You lose me when you start sounding like a manual. He doesn't sound like a manual now. He sounds like a man people listen to. I spent the rest of my shift pretending to restock fall pillows, but I was spinning. I couldn't get the images out of my head. That beard, the way his jeans actually fit, the curve of his shoulders that used to slump from silence but now sat proud. I went home and pulled out the old wedding album. Not out of nostalgia, out of disbelief. I needed to see what I had, what I lost, and what I never bothered to look at clearly. In those photos, Dale looked small, not physically, but spiritually, like a man shrinking beneath the weight of trying too hard for someone who made everything a joke. I kept flipping pages. Each one landed harder. He never fought me, never raised his voice. He just held on. Until he didn't, until one day, he vanished and became Jack Nolan. And somehow, everyone else saw him now. Everyone but me, until it was too late. That night, I couldn't sleep. I replayed our last argument in my head. Not even a real fight, just one of those offhand lines I'd throw like darts. If you had any ambition, we wouldn't be fixing the same damn boiler every winter. I said it because I was frustrated. I said it because I thought he'd always be there to take it. He didn't yell. He just passed me the salt and went still. Now he's on the cover of a magazine I wasn't meant to find. And I'm standing in a kitchen filled with decorative mugs that say, grateful and bless this mess, realizing the only man who ever truly knew how to fix anything finally stopped trying to fix me. I tried the email first, kept it short, polite, even humble. Hi, I'm reaching out on a personal matter. Please, just tell him Melissa reached out. I didn't expect him to write back, but I thought maybe someone on his staff, maybe an assistant with a soft spot or a weak moment would pass it along, something, anything. Instead, I got the bounce back within a minute. Inquiries for Mr. Nolan are not accepted via this address. No signature, no human name, just policy. I stared at the screen like it might flicker. It didn't. I went to the hall closet, pulled down the old tax folders, and dug out the address from a return envelope we used to file with, the P.O. box in Indiana. I wrote the letter by hand, 3 pages. Told myself I wasn't begging, I was just opening a door. Jack, I wrote at the top, though my hand hesitated. I told him I'd read the article, that I was proud, that I knew I'd been difficult, that things were complicated. I wrote the word sorry 3 different times and crossed it out each time because it looked small on the page. Instead, I wrote, I didn't see you until you were gone. I licked the envelope, sealed it, drove it to the post office, and stood in line like I was waiting to be forgiven. I sent it certified, tracked it, watched the delivery confirmation ping 2 days later. Nothing came back. No letter, no message, no receipt that said, I heard you. That's when the spiral snapped into something else, not desperation, something colder. I needed to see him, with my own eyes. I needed to know if the version of him in that magazine was real or just the fantasy I'd built in his absence. The Midwestern Energy Tech Summit wasn't cheap, but it was public. I bought a general pass, waited 2 weeks, practiced what I might say, rewrote my opening lines over and over in my head until they were memorized and numb. The day came, I wore navy slacks, heels I hadn't touched in years, and a blouse I once called my promotion shirt. I curled my hair, took time with my makeup. Not to look young, but to look aware, present, like a woman with purpose. The line to get in wrapped around the building. I waited 2 hours in stiff shoes and wind that wouldn't quit. I didn't complain, just rehearsed. When I got inside, I scanned the program. His name was listed halfway down the schedule. Jack Nolan, Diagnostics Beyond the Panel, the future of predictive maintenance. I sat in the third row, close enough to be seen, not close enough to be obvious. The room was full, mostly men in utility polos and branded fleece vests. They laughed with each other, exchanged business cards, talked in terms I didn't understand. I kept my hands folded in my lap and watched the stage, and then he walked out. He wore charcoal slacks, a pressed shirt, sleeves rolled just enough, no tie, no jacket, just confidence. The beard was a little thicker than in the photo, his hair shorter, neater, and his presence. He didn't just look different, he looked complete. The room hushed when he spoke, not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't need to. He talked about tools, thermal scans, workflow integration, but none of that landed for me. I just listened to the way he moved through his words, clean, certain, like a man who had carved out a space where nothing was owed and everything was earned. He didn't look at me, not once, not even a flicker of recognition. He scanned the crowd twice, deliberately, like speakers do to engage an audience, and his eyes swept right past me. It was worse than a snub. It was erasure. After his talk, people stood to applaud. I didn't. I stayed seated, hands tight around my purse, pulse pounding in my ears. He stepped off the stage and disappeared behind a black curtain with the conference logo stenciled on it. Security hovered at the edge. Access badges were required to go backstage. I had none, so I sat there, surrounded by voices praising a man I used to think was boring, used to laugh at, used to overlook, while pouring wine for women who called him invisible. Now he was invisible again, but only to me. I thought it was a mistake at first, some promo gimmick or fancy marketing stunt. The envelope was thick, black, matte, with gold trim so fine it shimmered against the light. No return address, no sender listed, just my name in tight serif print, Melissa Nolan. That last name stopped me for a second. I hadn't used it in months, not in public, not even in my head. Inside was a single card, heavy paper, embossed text. You are invited to a private gala hosted by Nolan Utility Innovations. Venue, Ironwell, the old bottling plant turned tech hub in downtown Lafayette. Dress code, formal. Date, 3 weeks from today. No RSVP instructions, no contact number, just the words, one guest, no press. For a full minute, I stood in the kitchen holding that card like it might vanish. Then I read it again and again. My hands started to shake, not from nerves, but from possibility. It was him. It had to be. It had to mean something. 3 weeks crawled. I second-guessed every detail. I bought a black dress, structured, elegant, maybe too much, but I wanted presence. I booked a stylist for my hair, practiced small smiles, learned the difference between bourbon and rye, just in case. The night of the gala, I pulled up to the venue and felt my pulse in my ears. The Ironwell used to be a dilapidated husk, broken windows, rusted signs, but now it gleamed, glass walls, copper lights, and low music spilling into the courtyard where people milled around in suits, cocktail dresses, and confidence. I stepped out of the car and immediately realized I'd overdone it. My heels were too high, my clutch too glittery, my necklace too loud. The other women were stylish in that quiet, expensive way that doesn't try hard, but always lands perfectly. Still, I walked in. People were murmuring already. About the host, about Jack. They said his name like he was a myth, a whisper that had finally grown bones. I floated past conversations about energy audits, adaptive code bases, and European expansion strategies. Everyone had a drink. Everyone seemed to know why they were there, except me. Then the lights dimmed. The low hum fell into hush. He walked on stage like it was nothing. No fanfare, no music, just Jack. Tailored navy suit, open collar. The beard was trimmed, sharp, hair slicked back. No gray in sight. His eyes scanned the room like he knew it already, like he'd built it himself. He waited for silence, didn't ask for it, just waited. It came. Then he spoke. Evolution doesn't ask permission, he said. It happens the moment you stop clinging to anchors. His voice hadn't changed, but the weight behind it had. He talked about systems, growth, rebuilding from scratch. But underneath every sentence, I could feel something else, something colder, not cruel, but deliberate. This space used to bottle sugar water, he said. Now it hosts ideas. Laughter, applause. I stood at the edge of the crowd, clutching my empty glass. And then he looked at me. Just 2 seconds. No blink, no smile, no surprise, recognition, a flicker of it. Then his eyes moved on, to the investors, the innovators, the crowd that belonged. I stood there in my overdressed glitter and watched him turn away. Not out of indifference, but because he could. I waited until the room thinned, until the buzz of praise and handshakes gave way to quiet clusters and last sips. He was standing near a display, mock-ups of thermal sensors, and an animated loop of predictive software visuals running on a mounted screen, the kind of setup he used to daydream about at our kitchen table while I scrolled through vacation packages I never booked. He held a glass of bourbon, neat, his posture was effortless. I approached, slow, my heels clicking too loudly in the hollow space. "Dale," I said, just loud enough to test it. He didn't flinch, but he didn't smile either. His gaze met mine, calm as a winter lake. That quiet of his, the kind that used to drive me crazy, was now steel, not silence from fear, silence like a locked door. "Why?" I asked. My voice cracked. "Why did you leave like that?" He took a slow sip of bourbon, let it settle before answering. "Because asking you to listen," he said quietly, felt more humiliating than walking away. I blinked, stung. "You could have said something." He tilted his head slightly. That familiar movement, like he was weighing the cost of explaining the obvious. "I did," he said. "You just laughed." And I remembered it, that night with the joke, the kitchen island, the laughter. I hadn't even looked at him. I just reached for the wine and rolled my eyes while the room roared. My throat tightened. Was all this just revenge? He didn't flinch, didn't scoff, just shook his head once, almost gently. "No, this is peace," he said. "You were just the catalyst." The word landed like glass breaking in slow motion. Catalyst, not enemy, not villain, just the trigger, the thing that made him stop living half a life. He turned his eyes back to the display as if the conversation was over, and maybe it was, but I couldn't move. "I didn't know," I said. "I didn't think." He cut in, not sharp, but firm. "You didn't look. That's different." I had no response. For once, the lines I always carried, the ones that bailed me out of conflict, made me the clever one, the strong one, were gone. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. Because what do you say when the person you dismissed becomes the man the room stands still for? Around us, people moved on. Laughter rose again in pockets. Waitstaff gathered empty flutes. A woman with a platinum lanyard brushed past, smiling at him. He nodded politely. Still didn't look back at me. I took a shaky breath. So what now? He finally faced me again, but softer this time. Not angry, just done. "Now I go back to my life," he said, "and you go back to whatever's left of yours." He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to slam any doors. He just stood there, whole. And I realized with bone-deep certainty that I was looking at a man who had finished grieving me long before I knew I was gone. "Then why invite me?" I called after him, the words leaving my throat before I could stop them. My heels scuffed the concrete as I followed, the hum of conversation swallowing the echo of my own desperation. He paused mid-step. Not for long, just enough. When he turned, there was no smirk, no self-satisfaction in his face, just clarity, the kind that makes your stomach sink before the words even land. "To answer the question you never asked," he said. Was I enough? The words hit me like glass in the chest. He let them hang there. 1 beat, 2. "You weren't even close." I didn't speak. Couldn't. He looked at me for the last time, not like a man weighing the past, not with resentment or heat, but with a calm detachment that told me the door wasn't just shut. It had been sealed behind him years ago. And then he turned away, toward a group of engineers in pressed jackets, investors in understated shoes, and firm handshakes. They opened their circle for him without hesitation. He slipped in easily, like someone who'd always belonged. I didn't. I stood where he left me, under flickering LED chandeliers meant to look like stars, holding an empty champagne flute I hadn't even tasted. I wanted to throw it, or scream, or demand something, but there was nothing left to demand. He hadn't erased me, That would have taken effort. He'd simply outgrown the version of himself that needed my permission to exist, and he never looked back. I walked outside alone. The night was colder than I expected. My car felt smaller. The road home stretched long and quiet, full of spaces where his voice used to live. He didn't destroy me, he just stopped playing dead, and that's what I couldn't forgive.